Yes, we are starting our next game now. That is the yellow sheet. That's the yellow sheet fantasy bingo, which synthesises concepts from the fantasy genre and theories of class. We are starting with one line. If you believe you have a line, raise your hand and call bingo. First round is for a line, and our first concept is taste. That's taste for our first concept.
Social class works on the symbolic as well as the material level. Pierre Bourdieu's capitals point to the significance of cultural knowledge and education in signalling and reproducing bourgeois and upper-class status. In fiction, we learn much about a character from their home, their clothing, makeup, possessions. All expressions of taste informed and shaped by cultural knowledge. Signalling that a character has the wrong kind of taste, from a British middle-class perspective, is an effective way of communicating disgust at undesirable internal qualities. Disgust is designed into the Dursleys' house in the Harry Potter series.
Privet Drive was fun to do. I remember we did spend some time looking for the ugliest sofas, the worst tiles for the kitchen, and lots of nasty pictures on the walls.
Worse than merely lacking taste, the residents of Privet Drive work hard at maintaining this manicured conformist suburb. They aspire to bourgeois living, but will never be innately tasteful. Promoted as aspirational, middle-class tastes and lifestyles are always shifting out of reach. They cannot be emulated or acquired through illegitimate means. Those who become overly concerned with keeping up appearances may become a figure of ridicule or risk being labelled pretentious.
Bouquet? That's spelled B-U-C-K-E-T.
Oh, bucket!
In his Dark Materials, Will Parry, the literary character, lives in a similarly monotonous, even more working-class suburb. But strikingly, in adaptation, the Parry home is transformed into a designer mid-century house and furnished accordingly. Unlike in the starkly lit Dursley home, little focus is given to the Parry's furnishings, which are presumed tasteful enough to transcend the material. Good characters never try to be tasteful. They possess the innate tastefulness of the middle classes. The bourgeois home has a deeply entrenched connection to interiority, the life of the mind. Such innate gifts are a core concern of the fantasy genre, which separates those who have it from those who are lacking. Contemporary fantasy continues to dole out moral and existential consequences for those who lack innate gifts like taste.
Our next analytical motif is mobility. Mobility. Thank you.
Fantasy books typically feature an illustrated map on the inside cover, providing the reader with foreknowledge of the predetermined route of the quest ahead. Fantasy film and TV reproduces this function in various ways, including using soaring aerial shots of an expansive landscape, granting the viewer the feeling of power and agency of movement over a knowable fantasy territory. The sociological concept of mobility, agency and power over movement through physical and social space, uncovers a class reading of fantasy's relationship with the landscape, borders and knowledge. As we saw with taste and the home, there are also privileges to secured fixity. The home is the formative origin point for the hero's journey, the familiar that must be left behind. In Portal Quest fantasy, the portal is a spatial and generic boundary between the fixed, known site of the home and into the secondary fantasy quest. But which characters are able to make use of these portals, and under what conditions? Characters marked as middle class possess the mobility to move through and have mastery over lands that are somehow fully known, yet freshly discoverable. In his Dark Materials, Lyra is destined to be an explorer like her parents. The contemporary fantasy film has traces of the romantic colonial adventure, an aspirational holiday, or the gap year spent backpacking, in which the hero can accumulate experience and worldliness, uncrowded by tourists or locals. Magical objects or creatures may confer an empowered mobility. Like the analogues of colonial expansion and tourism, these objects are reminiscent of luxury vehicles, private jets. This analogy becomes clear in his Dark Materials' environmental portent.
Every window that exists must be closed. Each time the knife makes a cut, darkness is released, bringing destruction across all of the world.
This instrument of mobility must be regulated. It would seem that one of the wishes fantasy text fulfills is mobility, a desirable class trait in its ultimate form, exclusive mastery over social and physical space, and even time.
Our next concept, labour.
In British screen fantasy, working classness is notable for its marginalisation or its absence. The urban working class of Britain are seldom meaningfully represented in these texts. Magic functions as a replacement for labour, or a justification for distance from work and the everyday. In Harry Potter, magic is an alternative to domestic labour, not replacing it entirely or the gendered roles we associate with household work. This kind of labour can be portrayed idyllically or pathologically, depending on context. While it may seem working classness and labour have been left to the muggles in the real world, they tend to reappear as useful symbols, even in the secondary world. To liberate the protagonist from low-status work, to add texture to the world building, to differentiate the chosen from the not-so-chosen, as pathos or something less sympathetic. At Hogwarts, food appears as if by Dumbledore's will alone. The books tell us another story of a bustling kitchen of house elves. Manual labour, when we see it at all, is displaced onto these inferior subspecies and social outsiders, while witches and wizards take on administrative, academic and professional vocations. Roger, in his Dark Materials, embodies labour. His friendship with our extraordinary heroine Lyra is one of subservience. A character marked by a relationship to labour is fixed in place, making them unfit for adventure or personal development. Labour symbolically aligns these characters with the material realm. They are unable to transcend to the fantastic. This reproduction of economic determinism and fixity is just one way the aesthetics of labour reinforce class boundaries in British fantasy texts. In Pullman's text and the adaptation, individuals have another deterministic symbol of their position in life: demons. Some characters are bound to their occupations through the permanence of their soul animal. Servants tend to have dogs, sailors might have fish or birds. In the television adaptation, though, background characters appear to have no demon at all due to budgetary constraints. Characters without that link to labour exhibit a more diverse range of demons, reflecting complex interior qualities. Those with a symbolic tie to labour across these texts are reduced to little more than bodies and the way those bodies can serve the hero, facilitating, among other things, their mobility. This could be through continued acts of service or something more drastic, like as a sacrifice.
Our fourth concept, individual. Individual.
Western storytelling privileges stories about individuals over universal types or collectives. The typical fantasy adventure is undertaken by a singular hero, assisted by generic supporting characters. In the background of these adventures lurks not only these types, but the masses, the antithesis of the figure of the individual. In Harry Potter, Muggles represent a mostly ignored, sometimes pitied, potentially threatening mass. Harry overhears Muggles described as a bothersome mass at King's Cross.
Packed with Muggles, of course. Come on.
Muggles are excluded from
9 3/4
and oblivious to the hero's journey, participation in magic, movement through magical portals, the possession of magical objects, and admittance to this particular boarding school. The Dursleys provide our only detailed impression of Muggle habitus. The image of monotonous suburbia was important to the filmmakers.
Chris Columbus was very interested in the idea of the misery of Harry's situation, a huge urban sprawl. And the best and most graphic way to illustrate that was identical modern houses, limitlessly, to the horizon, that big and that sprawling.
The first line of J.K. Rowling's book series reads, "Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much." This aspiration to uniformity and active rejection of particularity marks the Dursleys, and by implication, Muggles as a whole, as non-individuals. Through juxtaposition, the hero emerges as true individual. This status is foreshadowed in the first act with words like,
"Extraordinary people like your dad, like you."
You're the product of something extraordinary.
This is a journey of personal development. This narrative movement is exaggerated by the static nature of the supporting non-individuals. In his Dark Materials, Roger's life revolves around Lyra. Even beyond death, this child labourer has no autonomous desires or memories outside of Lyra's existence. This lack of interiority and autonomy is taken to its furthest conclusion. He's denied a true death until a more middle-class character can come and help him recall his memories. But of course, they are limited to clips of Lyra from the first episode. We again return to the hero's inner life, thoughts, emotions, perspective. Other, less middle-class characters are denied the kind of individuation Richard Dyer refers to as novelistic. This construct reflects and reproduces the barrier to true selfhood faced by marginalised people.
Hi guys, I'm Will.
Denied self-expression,
I have a knife.
self-narration, self-determination. Bourgeois individuation is so valued because it is exclusionary.
And next...
Bingo.
What's that? Who's that? Do we have a winner for our first prize? Yep, come up. Let me see. This is a line. Yeah, it looks like we have... So, as portent decreed, you have come. We have long awaited a hero, someone extraordinary to banish the darkness from our land. Please, embrace your destiny and collect your prize. Yeah, please move through. We've got we're on a schedule, thank you. And our next prize is for 2 lines.